we're all poets here in the house in, Poetry on the Move, and it's just so gracious of all of you to bring this community together from all over the world, right? So we can just share our stories and our difference, and it's all beautiful.
We are here today with Desmond Khan, and very excited, and just want to say hello first to start with.
Hi, Kimberly.
How are you?
I'm good.
Yes,
I'm
all
good.
the
How
way
are you?
from Singapore. That's right. What did you bring today? What did you?
This is a new poem, and it's not been published. I wrote it some time ago. This is titled Translation, Memory, and Your Principle of Reduction. There's an epigraph by Walter Benjamin. It goes like this. True translation is transparent. It does not obscure the original, does not stand in its light, but rather allows pure language, as if strengthened by its own medium, to shine even more fully on the original. Do you see the rising of air, not wisp in a swirl? Do you see my new life after non-breath? How could you? You weren't there. You were never there. That wasn't a question. I was not asking. That last statement was as definite a stoppage as the question, the non-question, like the 14 lines of a nonce sonnet. Death, its breathlessness, presents itself as but negative space, sudden undoing of a life of everything. That's the crude expunging. Do you see the chemistry now? The oxidation, reduction, how it changes things, the rusting faucet, even as water still drips from it. The halved apple and potato left to their own browning, how open-faced their bareness. Look at how defeated each surface looks. Do you see the wildfire? Its blaze so incandescent, it ignites and animates the night sky. There, houses and plains burning away down to ash and dead earth. There goes someone's dossier of lived life and every effort to archive what was precious and important. You ask yourself years after, what matter? What mattered after all? What matters as an insistence? Call it a countermand, an existential reversal of fortune, unless the rescission is but a dismantling of what didn't work, the awfulness and all that bad, unless from what's scrubbed out comes a clean slate, spotless, saved floor and form. That's it.
Know where to start. I think for one thing, I think that's the first poem we've had that refers itself to archiving, and just, gosh, all the metaphors. I'll let you speak to it a little bit.
I use the word translation memory. It's actually a computer term. It's a very unsexy term, right? It's actually a database of sentences and paragraphs and, clauses and even headings and titles that, companies use. It's called TM, and these companies use it to produce multilingual documentation. And I like to co-opt that word translation into memory, because I feel like when I'm writing, I'm always translating from word to image to sound to metaphor, to visual metaphor, to different senses, and then back to memory and emotion and thought, and even concepts like history and philosophy and so political, right? And in that book that we were talking about, The Good Day I Died, where I do talk about my near-death experience, one of the hardest things about translating that memory was translating, something like the angelic beings that I saw, that helped me, that were kind and stayed with me. How do you translate an experience like this where the emotions are the most extreme emotions in your entire life, the pain, the joy, they're so extreme. How do you translate time and space and how it functions in this other reality where time and space functions differently? There are no words for it. And this reminds me of what Derrida talked about, which is called aporia. It's like an impasse in language. And when after I came back, had to continue living life despite the near-death experience, I really got a sense of how language can't communicate certain experiences in the world. The ineffability, the impossibility of language at times, and that is just so real for me now. And even human experiences that we have now, like just relating to each other, there's so much more in the experience that language cannot encapsulate. And so part of the work of archiving is on a personal front. In creating our personal archives, we have to grapple with the ability for language to be that vehicle to honor our past, our present, our aims, our disappointments, and yet know that it probably is not completely adequate to the task, right? And as someone with multiple English degrees, you totally know what I'm talking about, right? The limits of language.
Yes, and so William Stafford has that. He's attributed with saying language can do what it can't say.
Yeah. And that is where Carolyn Forscher bridges the idea of poetry as witness.
Yes.
And I'd like to just read a paragraph from her, because she talks about poetry of witness as a living archive. So I think that coheres very nicely with your own theme, right? And in her book, Against Forgetting, 20th Century Poetry of Witness, there's these few words that she says. She says, in the poetry of witness, the poem makes present to us the experience of the other. The poem is the experience rather than a symbolic representation. When we read the poem as witness, we are marked by it and become ourselves witnesses to what it has made present before us. Language incises the page, wounding it with testimonial presence, and the reader is marked by encounter with that presence. Witness begets witness. The text we read becomes a living archive. So I just love it that, she just put it all down, and it's so true. Now, every time I read a poem, I'm reading a living archive,
Yes. Do you have another poem?
Yes, I do.
Are you ready for it yet?
All right, let me just pull it up. Yes, it is titled The Tallest Speech of All. And here it goes. I own the sun and the moon and the stars, the ones that appear in love songs. Those I own too. I don't own anything of this world. Who is the speaker of this poem? Who is the speaker of the poem you're reading? Who is the speaker of any poem in the world? That's the first question Cornelius Eady asks of a poem, as if the poem would deliver an answer, define its own myriad voices, claim some ontological presence. Who is the speaker within a defamiliarized thought, that luminosity for a mystic? A God poem must reference a precision, its own certitude of intent, a humbling of the poet's mind and practice and spirit. The transcendental signified is situated proper. It knows itself, knows who it is, who exists in the utterance. It speaks with that kind of unstrained clarity. That's it. That's my second poem.
You manage, when your poems have instantaneously layers and layers and layers, and they all work together as they're working individually, and I just wonder how you do that.
Oh, if I don't know. I don't know. It's I think it's a lot of intertextuality, this
I know.
idea that all of language in the
Creativity.
world, yeah, is a resource. He was my supervisor at Notre Dame, and that,
No.
yeah, I love him. I love him. And he's such a beautiful confessional poet. And I'm so experimental. So I really wanted to challenge myself by giving me, like a supervisor who did something really different. And he was so luminous because his voice is so honest. There's so much musicality in it, right? So he taught me a lot about that. And that he taught me to always question who's speaking behind the poem has always made me look at poems very differently, because I always took for granted a lot of things, right? That was the voice of a displaced author, or maybe a daughter to a mother, or God speaking to us, So but sometimes it could be anyone else. So we can't even take for granted who the speaker of the poem is, right? To bring back Derrida again, he wrote The Archive Fever all
Yes,
those years ago, which was so important because he looked at the archive in relation to how it would transform, say, human memory and how we felt about the world. But now when you look at his work, it's so different in the world now because with new media, with the interwebs, with Instagram, with Facebook posts, everyone's archiving every time they post a picture of themselves, and
that's right.
it's in real time. And the accessibility is unheard of in Derrida's time. He died in 2004, and no one could publish the way he needed an editor to publish, our publishing house to undertake his work, right?
Yes.
So the whole realm of archiving and its culture, its sociology has shifted considerably, and it has also changed power structures in the world. We can tell our stories very autonomously, and thereby empower our voices, right, through different platforms.
I'm thinking about your memoir, right? I'm thinking about, and I don't have it in front of me because I've been reading it on Kindle. Yeah. There we go. Yeah.
Oh.
So the way that you formed this book by interviewing yourself,
Yeah.
I think that says so much about how we as poets and writers create to answer the questions that trouble us, right?
Yeah. It's you're right, and that was a risk, but I was a journalist, a long time ago. That was my first job. And so
Right.
and one of the things about journalism is that you always have someone else, a third party, do the interviewing for that kind of objectivity and that remoteness, right? That professionalism. And so I knew it was a risk, but I also knew that I was probably the best person to ask myself the questions.
Yes.
Because I then would have to be responsible to myself to answer. And as a journalist, I would also know that I would ask myself the toughest questions. And one of the toughest questions that I would ask someone who says he's had a near-death experience is, why should I believe you? And I put it in there, It's like, what was time like? What was death like? Who did you see? So I asked all those tough questions, even when I didn't have the answers. And then when I didn't have the answers, I just said I didn't have the answers, which is what I wished my interviewees would ever tell me. But in terms of accountability of archiving and form, like you said, I think that because it was so traumatic and it took me over a decade, I went to poetry as a means of catharsis, that through beauty and through the aesthetic of the lyric and the narrative, I could almost run away from thinking too seriously about what I experienced when I died. And that's how the beauty helped. So by working with sestinas, with haiku, with sonnets, the form, just being rigorous with the form, took my mind off dwelling too much about what it might all mean, or what my life has to become to be more responsible to God. And I'm very honest about it. I'm Catholic, yeah, Catholic. And for me, that's become extremely important to live a good life, because now I know the stakes are very high and I do not want to suffer for bad decisions in this life, So for me, my vocation is probably as a poet. So I feel that my lyric also has to attest to a kind of, I don't know, a kind of love for everything, despite how terrifying the world has become. But
yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
I was writing a poem about birds, and suddenly I sprung onto this idea of the archive as a nest, right? And when I researched, I found out that there are very different kinds of nests that birds make. And it became a very interesting metaphor for the archive. Just to give you an example, the ruby-throated hummingbird, right, makes a nest structure. Since we're talking about structure, crafted from bark, leaf, strands, and silk fibers, but it attaches it to a tree branch with spider silk. And on the outside, it decorates it with lichen to camouflage it. And on the inside, it's got hair or feathers for insulation. I mean, can you believe how ornate the whole thing is? And then there's the sociable weaver that has a compound nest, nests within a nest. And there are over 100 breeding pairs that can be nesting all at the same time in this big thing. And then I also found out there's the jail falcon that doesn't really build its own nest, but likes to take over abandoned nests, like by ravens, for example. And some of these are reused for centuries. Like there's one in Greenland that's found to be in use for 2,000 years, over 2,000 years. So in thinking about, how the archive as a nest, if each bird species even has an inherited memory of how to build a nest, my big question for me in terms of the archive of memory is, what are the innate building blocks, or impulses or intuitions or physiological go-tos, right, that goes into our human ways of building personal archives? I mean, as a human species, do we have a kind of inherited memory of how to build our archive? So how do we forage, save, discard, declutter, burn, incinerate, revisit, revise, restore, and sconce, try to make permanent or precious all these memories in our memory bank, and that's such an interesting question for me now that I'm that you've had me thinking about the archive so much, so.